The European View Podcast. Your place to navigate the insights of our policy journal, brought to you by the Martens Centre. With Sara Pini.
Hello, and welcome to the European View Podcast, your way to navigate through the main issues of our policy journal with valuable insights from the authors themselves. I'm Sara Pini, the Assistant Editor-in-Chief of the European View and the Senior Research Officer at the Martens Centre. And with this episode, we will start a journey into the challenges and hopes of the European youth, which is the theme of the new issue of the European View. With us today are Agnieszka Homańska, head of the political cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, and Wojciech Przybylski, sorry for the pronunciation, editor of Visegrad Inside and president of the Respublika Foundation in Warsaw, where Agnieszka has also previously worked. Agnieszka and Wojciech have co-authored an article titled "The Next Generation Need a New Social Contract for European Defence," which offers fascinating insights on how to rebuild the societal trust needed to involve young people in Europe's defense efforts. You can find this, of course, and all the other articles of the European View on our website, martencenter.eu. Agnieszka, Wojciech, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, hello. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, we're pleased to join.
So I would start with what I think is the most original aspect of your article, which is the way you reverse the perspective on defense mobilization. You argue that instead of trying to impose old frameworks and models from the top, we should rather tune in with the values, the priorities, even the sensibilities of Gen Z, in order to make service more attractive to them. Can you share a few examples?
Thank you very much for saying this, and actually for highlighting that it actually makes sense to listen to the group to which you are trying to reach to, because this is very often overlooked. And very many policies right now are hard defense driven. And of course, we have the full scale war on our continent. And this is something that Gen Z, when they were young, they were told that nothing like this would ever happen because we live in this, peaceful, liberal world order where the so-called the end of history, of course, this is not what the author meant, but the end of history is there, so nothing such as a big war would happen. And here we are again, and the decision makers right now are very much focused on this hard side. But as we also tried to argue with Wojciech, it is still clearly visible that young generations still fear those daily systemic challenges, sometimes even more than a real kinetic warfare. And while thinking about getting them on board when it comes to defense, we must take into consideration the things that for most let me just give you some numbers. So for the respondents Europe-wise aged 18-30, rising prices and the cost of living is their top priority for the EU to act, followed by climate change and economic growth and job creation. And behind those three, there is defense and security issue. So it would be just ineffective to tell those young generations, oh, you have to be here and you have to fight for your country or for your continent, while not having the possibility, to go to university or start your family, move out from your parents, and so on and so forth. And while taking this into consideration, we managed with Wojciech to identify some top ideas on how this new so-called social contract should be drafted. And it can only be done while taking into consideration what really drives the young generation today, and not what drives the decision makers who previously, of course, they also were 18 and 20. But I have this feeling that many of them has already forgotten that.
So you mentioned the fact that climate change is to young generation more important than security, but at the same time, in the introduction of your article, you mentioned an aspect of Russia's invasion of Ukraine that is, I think, sometime overlooked as an attempt to leverage climate change in order to disrupt Europe's security. So the two things are linked, right?
They are absolutely linked, and you're right, Sara, to say that they are absolutely overlooked. Very few understand and take the effort to read Russia's strategic documents that we quote in the article, both the current national security strategy and the foreign policy of Russia from before the invasion to 2022, and from after the invasion. The foreign policy has been updated and molded on the security paradigm of Russia, have been emphasizing the weak spot of climate change in the system of security and foreign policy Moscow wants to leverage against Europe, but also against the global South and Africa. I'll give just two real life examples. First, we need to look back 11 years back, to 2014, and the invasion that took place at that time, the disruption on of the wheat export and supply to North Africa, both from Ukraine but also from Russia, has had tremendous political and security consequences on all of Europe. If you want, there was a direct link between the unrest and insecurity, food insecurity back then, that Russia was perfectly aware of, that led to the unrest in the MENA countries in the region, and also contributed to the migration pressure of Europe, something that Russia skillfully plays. Let's not joke ourselves. I mean, they are really the masterminds of strategic play, like few others, and certainly not the European Union. Second, there is the big climate objective of Europe. I actually would personally, I guess, as much an analytical form support as a drive for autonomy. Europe wants to get away from the dependencies of fossil fuel, especially the fossil fuel from Russia, because it was coming with a political ticket, with a political bill to pay. And we still see that in the form of how Russia fossil fuel dependent countries, Slovakia and Hungary, in case of Hungary, a country that even increased the dependency since the invasion in 2022, they've been acting politically and in security policy on the, if not the orders of Russia, but as if they were in perfect synchrony of the Russian strategic interest. Russia, in its doctrine, has been seeing the move away from this dependency on fossil fuel and towards the objectives of the climate accords, global climate accords, as a weak moment in a vulnerability in the European policy, and they wanted to exploit it in order to keep their choke point on Europe, and to be able to drive European politics into submission by exerting those pressures. Luckily for us, so far, European Union has been also navigating these waters well enough, showing that it can maneuver out of these dependencies. And Russia needs completely new markets, which are not coming without the political bill on their side when it comes to dependencies from China, for instance, to seek profit from their model of economy. So yes, these are the wars, these are the tensions that have climate change impact, built into the logic, built into the rationale of why the military conflict is also there. This is not maybe the primary, but it's one of the foundation elements of the rational logic of leading the war. And then you can ask the young generation who is for climate change, whether Russia is a good actor in this. And the answer is clearly not really.
Okay, now let's go back to the topic of young people mobilization and engagement. Your article highlights some interesting example, mainly focusing on Central, Eastern, and even a bit Northern Europe. Are these approaches being adopted also by other countries? Like, Wojciech, I know you recently spoke on France 24 about the military service announced by Paris. Do you think this is the right path?
Any path in any country will be the best path the country can take. There is no one size fits all. You cannot make Finland multiplied by 27. You don't have Estonian full awareness of the urgency, so to allow for obligatory conscription. So what we see is that every country tries their own model. And Central Eastern Europeans definitely produce a number of different interesting impulses. Poland has announced in March by the Prime Minister Tusk, we heard the announcement that we want to reach 500,000 people who are ready. I mean, at least they went through military training, alongside with those with full military trainings as soldiers, reserve, territorial defense. So altogether, 500,000 people, which sounds immense given the context of the current numbers. Each country in Europe, until not long ago, did not surpass 220,000 troops. Even countries like France or Great Britain, which are considered the strongest in terms of military preparedness. So you can't mend the gap so quickly. My applaud to the French leadership in this domain was that they initiated the subject, that they opened the public to the prospects, and they have shown and demonstrated that the democratic freedoms come also with democratic responsibilities, part of which is this very républicain, if I may use the small r French adjective, attitude to the duty to your country, which involves service. And the smart way about it, like Sweden perhaps also has, is to consider it as a career advancement rather than merely, something that you waste your best years of your life with. So this 5,000 contingent for the start is considered for the elite, for those who want to scale up with a good salary. Now Germans are very, very attentive, and now they want to topple that and triple the salary and have their own recruitment program for the young generation. And it's not about the competition between the countries, but it also is about finding the best way and approach to your own society, which responds in their own way to the big challenge, strategic challenge we all share as NATO and EU countries.
Yeah, speaking about NATO, Agnieszka, last April you participated in the NATO Youth Summit. What was the general mood, and did you learn about other best practices beyond the one that you discuss in the article?
The general mood was that young people really understand what's going on. And this is good to bring them to the table, not only to the audience or not only, as you know, this youth washing movement when you, or like one organizer just invites young people or women or any other minority group to some place and then don't mix them into the debate. And what I was hearing very much actually corresponds to what Wojciech was just saying. And if I'm not mistaken, it was our late president, Lech Kaczynski, who said that Europe doesn't consist only of Polands, meaning that we have many different perspectives from other countries. And we should, there is this whole idea of whole of government or whole of society approach. We should have also whole of country or whole of Europe or even whole of NATO approach, when we see each other and where we can learn from each other. And going back to your question on the youth summit, I have to be very frank, as I was at the NATO summit. Young generation, they don't want to hear all those stories again and again. They want real action and they want to be treated very fair. So the fact that right now NATO Secretary General or the NATO leadership decided to cut the budget for public diplomacy is a bad decision, because you can't only focus on as I said at the beginning, you can only focus on the hard part. You have to have better strategic communication. You have to have better ideas on how to promote the values of NATO and the idea of defending a country, a continent. And yes, that's true that one of NATO Youth Summit's results was the creation of the Youth Advisory Board, which is a advisory board to the Secretary General. Secretary General, yes, it consists of around a dozen of young people aged 18 to 30. And they were supposed, to show to NATO leadership how to communicate and how to cooperate better with the young generation. And this board was not created in a successful way, I'd say it like that. We don't really see that many results. We don't really see NATO strategic communication and NATO outreach to young generation going up, and we don't see the understanding. I remember the president of Montenegro was speaking there, and he said that, I don't remember the correct number, but he says that the understanding of what even NATO, when people hear the word NATO in Montenegro, they don't really know what it is, and they mistake it with some other institution, because also in such a globalized world, we tend to put so many information in one basket. So the public opinion is okay, this is NATO, this is EU, this is something, we all want to be a part of this something, and we don't really understand what we are really talking about. And I just wanted to go back to our article for a second, if I'm not going to reveal too much. But in our final recommendations, we tried to draft a playbook, because essentially this is something we really talk a lot and we have all those academic discussions. And this is exactly what happened at NATO summit. People really wanted to get real solutions, real suggestions, things that can be implemented. And this feeling of need to serve a country in the younger generation will not come from will not come from the same place, will not have the same roots as for those of the previous generations. So we argue that we need to, or actually decision makers need to elevate national service to an aspirational paradigm and combine it with some career milestone. So we were discussing at this NATO Youth Summit, people were really asking me, okay, so NATO has decided to, put up to 5% spending, and what will happen with the education system? What will happen with the healthcare system? Does it mean that we are going to only pay for tanks and arms while not being able to obtain a better higher education? And taking from other countries, like the regional perspective that Wojciech spoke about, there are countries who already were innovative enough to create, I think it was Estonia, to create this cyber conscription. When you reach out to young people who are very good with IT, who are already there and who are seeking to do something with their life, to educate, to get better education, and you allocate money and power into first getting them educated and like giving them the possibility to develop, and B, you are making them cyber conscripts so they can serve your country, but not in the very old-fashioned way, meaning that you don't have to only fight in the trenches. And I'm referring to all of those issues because these were exactly the topics of our discussions. And I am very happy that I was able to, be there and come back and report it to our decision makers, because for many of them, it was like this eye opener of wow, the young people, they don't only stand in a corridor and complain, they actually have some real ideas that maybe it's time. It was Churchill who said that it's good to act and decide, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen.
Yeah, for our listeners, I encourage you to read the entire article because there are a lot of other examples like this, a bit out of the box, at least as far as normal traditional policymaking is concerned. Now, one last question deriving from this actually. You spoke about educational opportunities, about job opportunities, about higher salaries. So, do you think that this new model could also serve as an engine of social mobility, as Napoleon's system of mass conscription did in the past, and maybe could also be, again, as in the past, a way to help integrate young migrants or to foster trust and the sense of shared purpose in our increasingly diverse societies?
Look, we put the question of the new social contract next to the military service. And that's not without a reason, because there can be very practical incentives, and they are very important for the young generation when it comes to exactly the points that you mentioned: career choices, options for your life, upgrading simply your your starting point in the professional life otherwise. But it also comes down to, and boils down to the question: is the new generation plugged into current society without the conscription, without the military service, without the threat of the war that Europe is now also facing? And our starting point is probably no, because the generation, the Gen Z, all across different countries, but specifically this is felt in Central Eastern Europe, does not necessarily believe that the social contract that has secured the retirement, the support system of their fathers, mothers, grandmas, and grandpas, and even earlier, is still for them to hold when they actually will be in need. There is a systemic problem of trust, and military service alone will not solve this problem. This problem is making probably a very readable, it emphasizes the need for a very readable, very clear contract in which you deliver and you can expect. And that part is still missing across number of European countries. But I think it's doable. It is absolutely possible to see all these advancements as elements of state building, of civic education, of mingling with people whom you otherwise also don't know how to mingle, I imagine, or at least sometimes it's hard. You can treat it as part of a big adventure. And judging from the performance in a number of other countries that are also very peaceful countries in Europe, like Austria or Switzerland, that have conscription, that they have obligatory military service, and everybody serve, you don't necessarily need to have a militaristic society. Actually, you can have a very peace-loving society whose member are really quite aware of what it takes to preserve your freedoms, what it takes to keep up with the good work the country is doing for you later on. And I think this is the message we tried to sell. In order to address this problem, you really need to look at the very basic perspective of those who are participants and their upcoming, future, not only voters, but leaders, and how they look at the problem through this very acute challenge of military threat that is rising in Europe. the prospects of coming the society together is certainly there, depending how you do it. Here I might doubt, I put some doubts to the French model, because out of all the youth, you have only 5,000 people who are participating in the military. And I don't exactly know the selection process, but as far as I was reading about it, it is a system of application. It's quite elitist. Now look at Sweden, outside of Central Eastern Europe. Sweden also has a obligatory conscription model, but it's a mix of lottery and competence. So in a way, every participant feel that through the lottery system, plus mixed with the competence that are sought by the military, you might participate in that, and you actually can win on that. Probably also, like Agnieszka was mentioning, through participation in the most advanced technological projects, which today make or break the military results, as the case of Ukraine and Russia shows. It's a high-tech race, essentially. The country and the participants of the society who take part in this deep tech race to be at the forefront are also going to win individually, and are also, judging from other countries who have been building up on this, like United Kingdom, like Israel, you can see that they've been making the society thicker, closer, and able to deliver on the cutting-edge innovation. So there are the promises part, of course. But I think I would stress with my one last sentence again, the social contract, the foundation of why do we do it for, needs to be retold, rethought, and adjusted to the new realities. And you need to be very, very, even brutally frank with the young generation that does not believe that the old social contract is still working for them in the next generations. Without tackling this problem, you will not gain the trust that is necessary to, be really in this Republican spirit participants in building up our collective security.
And if I may add up to that, this is exactly where the real challenge for the current political class and for the mainstream parties come. Because, to draft something new, you have to reevaluate this something old and somehow discard those outdated assumptions. And here, populists come into place, and they have really good story, really good narrative, really good communication. What the Democrats with the small d and the liberals have are policies and delivery. But in order to get your policies delivered, you have to be in place to do that. And I worry that if the current political leadership don't understand this and don't sit down and take into consideration everything that the next generations are afraid of, are wanting to have, and so on and so forth, they are just going to employ, probably via elections, those populists. And then they are going to be challenged with this delivery part. And okay, let's be frank. We all know that they are not really good at delivering. We can see it in many European countries, for example, the Netherlands. However, once they enter in the system, it will be very difficult to get rid out of them. So right now, we are still in a position of, deciding. This is the beauty of democracy. You never know who is going to win. But you are still in this electorate process of governing and trying to understand, drafting policies, what is going to be better, what is going to be worse. Why don't we just do it all together, bringing in the younger generations and the more experienced ones?
Thank you very much. And you're giving these mainstream, let's say, parties and policymakers some interesting ideas. So thank you very much for sharing these insights today. That's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Sara, very much. Think of the dilemmas we're in currently not as guns or butter. For the new generation, think of them as guns and butter, because it can be a win-win, but we need to listen also and get the young generation that participates involved in the exercise.
Thanks. And for those listening in, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and discover all the interesting insights of the European view on our website, martencenter.eu, and on all our social media channels. Thank you, and stay tuned for more.
This was the European View podcast, your place to navigate the insights of our policy journal. Follow the Martens Centre for more.